videographers aren't here today. So. If you feel like you did something wrong, it's probably because you did something wrong.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
Oh, can you turn this on? Button. Hari Om. That sounds loud. My elaborate notes. Jai Ma. Go for it. Put it on the Kali Mandir thingy. Oh, wait, yeah, so it's queued. Okay, now we're ready. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devi Mahatmya Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindebhyo Sarva Lokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Dharmasya Sarva Dharma Sarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Majmam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Shri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Jai Ma. So, today is very auspicious. It's we're beginning our Navaratri season. And by Tithi, it is still Amavasya. We celebrated Amavasya yesterday because of the way the rules work, and when you have to do the Kali Puja for the Mahalaya Puja, we did it yesterday. But today, still Amavasya is still officially in effect. Although by now maybe it's already moved to Pratima. I'm not sure. It may have already changed. I hadn't checked when the time changed. But it's very interesting that this autumnal, what's the word? Autumnal Navaratri celebration. It's the most important of the Navaratris. Of course, there's many other Navaratris. Actually, something that's always supposed to be told, it's a funny part of the story, but it's always told, is that this is not the original Navaratri. This is how it's always told. The original Navaratri, because you don't worship Ma, it's part of the setup for Durga Puja, actually. You don't worship Ma in the fall. You worship Ma in the spring. Because Ma's manifest body is Mother Nature itself. And so the deity, the Shakti of Ma, she sleeps in the winter. And she sleeps in the fall. She falls asleep in the fall and sleeps through the winter. And then in spring she wakes up. In the summer she's fully, as far as cycles of nature go. Right? And so it says in the ancient times that her worship would be done at this equivalent time in spring. But then it said something happened that Lord, in the time of Ram Lila, Lord Ram's, something bad happened to Lord Ram. Maybe you remember the story. Something inauspicious happened. That Shakti, his Shakti, the Divine Mother, as form of Sita, was stolen and kidnapped by the demon Ravana. She had a 1 year ultimatum, right? Either in 1 year you come to me willingly, Ravana said, or I'll kill you. And he couldn't force himself on her because he had forced himself on another woman, and she had been cursed. He had been cursed that he would die if he ever tries to force himself. Therefore, he had to come willingly, but she could, or I'd definitely kill you. So he gave her 1 year. And so by the time Hanuman found her, if you know the story, when Hanuman jumped over the ocean and found Sita, it was, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was pretty much like 11 months into her abduction. So there wasn't much time, right? And so Lord Rama, in order to get the strength to battle Ravana, he wanted to worship Shakti. You have to worship Shakti to do battle. And so he needed to do Durga Puja, right? And so the appropriate sages of the time said, okay, Durga Puja is coming in spring, right? But spring is 6 months away, or 5 months away, or 7 months away, however you're counting. And I don't have 6 months or 7 months because from what the news I got from Hanuman, Sita will be killed in a few days almost, right? So he did the ceremony immediately at the time. And so within the Durga Puja tradition, the first ceremony it's done, it could be done like it's done like at sunrise on Shasti, I think, on the 6th day in a few days, or earlier in the morning the ceremony is done. A particular auspicious time is called Akal Bodhan, means waking up at the wrong time. When you wake somebody when they're deep asleep, you say, like, Durga, wake up, gotta go to work. It's like, no, I don't, I just fell asleep, or the kid's waking you up, Never at the right time. So it's like, and so part of the ceremony is to wake her up out of season. Now, as I say, so they say, oh, this Navaratri was founded by Lord Ram. Originally, Navaratri was done in spring, but since the time of Lord Ram. So it's a fairly recent thing. By recent, we mean Treta Yuga. So it's always a funny thing because, and also historically, if you anthropologically and historically, there's the earliest reference to Navaratri is the fall Navaratri, not the spring Navaratri. But part of the fall Navaratri became the story that it's not the original Navaratri. That maybe it's an ancient memory of an ancient time, an older ceremony, or a reference to people worshiping the goddess when spring happens, when she seems to awaken, right? But it's part of the thing. So this is not the original Navaratri; it's the second Navaratri. And so there's actually 4 Navaratris in the year, right? This is the most famous one. There's a Vashant Navaratri in spring, then there's one in summer, and one in winter. Winter is right after Moni Amavasya, during the Kumbh Mela. That's right after the Kumbh Mela. The height of the Kumbh Mela, it's within there. So those they sometimes call Gupta Navaratris. They're hidden because most people just don't, not hidden necessarily, but most people don't know. Like this Navaratri is done in a grand scale, right? This week, the next couple of weeks, there'll be pujas and sacrifices and all-night dances and fire sacrifices and processions and sadhana. I mean, there's everywhere you go. Dimitri said the other day, what did he say? That they set up like a spreadsheet of all the things happening during Navaratri and figure out what they're going to go to every day. There's something going on every temple. There's so much going on, right? To figure out how to plan his plan of attack for the 10 days, where they're going to go. I like that spreadsheet of everything. Apparently, we're not in it today. We didn't make it. Something else going on today. They were here yesterday. So so this is not Gupta. It's very much awake, right? And so then we every year we think that that for thousands of years, a couple thousand years, actually 4,000 years in the Western tradition, not that Western-ish tradition, and the goddess tradition has been neglected or attacked, right? It's been outlawed in many traditions. It's been goddess temples have been destroyed, goddess images have been destroyed, have been and are being destroyed, but since so long. with a new versions of religion that had no place or little place or threatened by the preceding goddess traditions. It seems that we have to be real careful when you're making statements about prehistory, because they're by nature prehistory. You can only say seems to be. There's evidence for that the earliest awakenings of religious consciousness was goddess oriented. Some of the earliest images, religious images, are figurines of female figurines that were considered to have a religious cultic meaning, and so this goes way back, right? But now it seems like, not in our little circle, but in many people's circle, this would be weird that people worshiping like goddess or the mother god or mother goddesses and things like that. But every year at the end of Navaratri, when it's all finished, we're very much appreciative that she hasn't been fully forgotten. Millions. I mean, how many Hindus are there? There's over 1 billion, right? There's over 1 billion Hindus, I think. I had just recently. I spoke to a group and I mentioned the number, and I already forgot it, but it was my very deep Wikipedia scholarship, so it wasn't the deep. I probably should tell how many Hindus are. So I remember the number. 4 days ago I knew the number. But it's over 1 billion Hindus, and most of those Hindus are celebrating Navaratri, even if they're not goddess worshippers or goddess devotees. This is a season of the goddess, so it's like, so independent of everything else, these 9 days, these 10 days, it's still a fraction of the world. It used to be the whole world, the whole world. Now it's more people, but less of a percentage. But this Navaratri, compared to the other Navaratris, is a great awakening. The Gupta Navaratris are celebrated by hardcore devotees, tantrikas, in their own sadhana. They increase their fasting and chanting, their esoteric practice, guru-given practices. It's not such a public celebration. So yesterday we celebrated Mahalaya Basha, and so this Basha is especially dedicated to the ancestors, those who have passed our ancestral roots. And during these 2 weeks, called Shraddha Paksha, from Purnima to the last 2 weeks up to ending yesterday, according to the date or the tithi of somebody who's passed away in your family, that they passed away on the 3rd day of the moon cycle, whatever year, whatever month it was in, right? You feed them and do ceremonies for their benefit and their blessings and their benefit usually on the day, whatever the day of the year, whatever the day of the month, the 1 year anniversary. But then you also do the anniversary during these 2 weeks. It says, I mentioned yesterday, that the ancestral realms and the earthly realms are near each other. This is a time where they're believed to be close. And so we do, and then on Amavasha, Mahalaya Basha, it says that if you don't remember the dates, if you don't I could probably figure it out. I can probably, it would take me a little bit on, a good online punch and gum to find out when my grandmother died, find the date, and then find out the tithi and to celebrate that day, or my mother died or something. You can find dates like that. But there's many people we don't remember and we don't celebrate. But on Mahalaya Basha, you can pray for all the ancestors. And it said that they line up, I mentioned yesterday, they line up in rows to accept our food like a bandara, right? So we invoke them, and we offer pindas and prasadam from Mas Puja for their benefit. So it's interesting that I think it's interesting that part of Durga Puja, part of the Navaratri, is intense cleaning, right? We spent a month cleaning. Outside the house gets washed, the walls get washed, books get taken off the shelves and cleaned and put back. Every piece of brass gets polished. Of course, we clean the house every month to prepare. About 10 days before Amavasya, we start cleaning. So we're on a constant cycle, daily, weekly, and a monthly cleaning. But then there's a yearly where we shampoo the rugs, we clean out the fireplace. I mean, we do a deeper cleaning. Because you're invoking, of course, Ma lives here, but part of the mood of Durga Puja is that you're inviting Ma to your house. And if your earthly mother comes to your house, you probably start cleaning a few weeks in advance. Like, oh, my mom's coming, you got to start cleaning. When you're an adult and you have your own house, you have to clean. So you have to prepare for her, any important person. And the mood of Durga Puja, Navaratri, is that your Ma, the daughter of the house, your mother, and also your daughter is coming to your house, right? So you clear and prepare. And I think there's a correspondence in our sadhana that we have to, before you invoke Shakti, you have to purify the environment. We sometimes think that before, it hasn't started raining yet, but it's most likely to be they believe it's going to be a rainy year this year, which is God's grace, we're getting some rain. But we're in danger when there's rain. We live by a creek that floods. We live in a river, not on the bank of a river I mentioned a few weeks ago. We live in a river, So sometimes it floods when it rains well. But we have to prepare. We start preparing ahead of time, knowing that the rain's coming. We start cleaning. We do it, and then the city also double checks that there's no obstructions in the river, there's no garbage in the river, there's no branches blocking, because there's going to be a lot of power going through. So you have to clean. We have to prepare for that amount. The millions of gallons of water that will pass daily through the river, through our little creek here. It's dangerous, right? It's life-giving, and it's supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen every year. But it's dangerous, right? You have to prepare for it. So cleaning is also part of that. When you invoke Shakti, you have to create a safe, a clear environment. So we have to clean. Therefore people do all kinds of practices to, your external world should be clean, and your internal world has to be cleared and cleaned, right? Just like you think of, like before Kundalini awakens, you use a similar yogic interpretation, the same thing. The chakras have to be purified, the nadis have to be purified, right? The nervous system and consciousness has to be strong enough and balanced enough to withhold such awakening without, otherwise there's going to, if too much water comes and we're not prepared, it's going to damage the bank. So much damage can happen. So it can happen to our own psyche and system also. And I think that part of the purification process is the 2 weeks and Mahalaya presiding for the ancestors, and we have to make. I don't know if we can ever make peace with our ancestors, but at least we have to do. We have to ask blessings and wish them well. That seems to be the minimum, because they've given us this body and our life, right? And so we have to, and then our immediate parents and like that, they've literally taught us how to hold a fork and go to the bathroom and everything. Without them we wouldn't like that. So all of our ability, all of our good qualities come from them, right? Our culture, our language, we didn't invent our language. We learn a language that with everything is passed on. Culture, practice, behavior, psychology, everything is passed on. But because of that, we can also, like all of our struggles, can also be sometimes pointed. Right, so it's not always just like, we just wish, but minimally, whether we have a good relationship or a bad relationship, the relationship we should have is that of giving blessings and asking blessing. We should be well-wishers and asking for well-wishing. So I think Mahalaya is part of that. It's kind of clearing some of the past, or making peace with the past, or getting blessings from the past, so that this new dynamic practices of Navaratri can happen. So, as I mentioned, today is Amavasya. Some in India, today would be actually tomorrow. Officially, the Navaratri starts tomorrow, right? And the problem is that Navaratri lasts, although it's 9 nights, it's actually only 8 nights long, because there's no Dvitiya. Tomorrow is Pratima, the first day, and then tomorrow is Tritiya, and the third day. So we skip. So the second day is there, but it's in between. It doesn't get its own day. And so if those who are doing like worshiping the Navadurgas, it's a common thing to chant. We amongst our group, we chant mantras to the Navadurgas. You could start today, but today is really not Navaratri. So if you start tomorrow, you're supposed to double up. You start Shaliputri and then Brahmacharini both tomorrow. Or if you want to split it, you can do Shaliputri today and Brahmachari tomorrow. Right. And in India, it starts tomorrow, but it gets its full 9 days. But it also starts tomorrow. So anyway, that's a weird calendar thing that's happening. Happening this time. And so Navaratri is practiced in so many different ways. Through every community in India, they celebrate it differently. Of course, our tradition is we're a Bengali tradition, so Durga Puja becomes a central thing. And Durga Puja is celebrated in the last 4 days. And you'll see Ma will come, a beautiful image of Ma will be here next weekend, and be worshipped. It's called the Durga Parivar, Durga and her 4 children, Lakshmi and Saraswati, Kartikeya and Ganesha, and their various cars and vehicles and mounts. Right? And it's very sweet, because the mood there is very, very interesting, because the goddess, there's the awesome power of the infinite goddess, the infinite power of nature, of cosmic deities, of Kali and Durga. These are fierce, overwhelming type of deities, right? But Sri Ramakrishna said that in the beginning you see God was 10 arms. And you see like, oh, it's the awesome power. Each arm represents a Shakti, right? All powerfulness of God. And then that God becomes, he says, the four-armed deity like Vishnu, right? And then he becomes a two-armed like Krishna. And then he becomes a baby, not even a two-armed, becomes a helpless baby. So when that happens, as your love and intimacy increases, the awareness of the awe and reverence decreases. Where you're not seeing God as infinite power. You see it pretty soon, it's like when you're either cowering in front of the awesome power of God or you're praying that awesome power to bless you, right? But when you get to baby Krishna, you're actually huddled over him, not bowed before him, right? Are you okay? Does he need anything? He hasn't had his bath. He hasn't gone to sleep, and it's getting too late to sleep. It's completely changed. In one sense, it's ridiculous, but it's not. It's bhava. It's relationship, right? And that allows loving relationship allows even the infinite to be comprehended and dealt with so wonderfully. And so this is a big part of Durga Puja. In the story, in the Puranas, she gets married, Parvati gets married, and goes off to Kailash with Lord Shiva. And the stories, Himavat and Menuka, the parents, they're crying so much. I mean, they're happy for her, but also crying. There's the sentiment of the Indian family tradition that you cry because the daughter leaves home and joins the husband's house, right? But the husband is not a normal husband. He lives in the mountain. He has no house, right? He has no bed. He has no roof. He has no kitchen, right? He has no clothes, right? It's like, right? And so the mood is like, oh my goodness. So it's like we're happy that she's happy, but she can't be happy. She was happy. Everyone's happier at home, right? Mother's love is there. Her friends are there, right? Father's affection is there, like that. And so the idea that once a year she comes home. So Durga Puja is her return home, where and so Shiva on the Shasti is a day when brother-in-laws are worshipped, right? Because the son-in-law is worshipped and honored and given his favorite food and things like that. Because Shiva is a son-in-law, he brings the family, right? Leaves them with the grandparents and goes back home. He gets 4 days off. And there's lots of cartoons modern day where it's like, oh, now he's him and his friends are smoking ganja and doing all the stuff that he's not allowed to do when the wife's there and the kids around the kids, and the wife doesn't allow it, and the kids, it's not proper to do in front of the kids. So there's lots of tradition like that Shiva's having his own fun for a couple of days, right? Without anybody thwarting him. And Durga brings with her kids, she has a great time, right? It's 4 days of parties, right? The form of the elaborate pujas, but it's food and music and fancy dress so it's a very ancient tribal primal ritual. If you see here some of them, the drums and the sacrifices that go on, it's very, very ancient and primordial and primal, right? But it's also loving and social. It's a family. It's like Christmas and Easter and 4th of July pulled. I mean, it's all, everything mixed in. There's national things. It's all kinds of things mixed together. It is purely religious, because the secular part of it is part of the household religion. The daughter's back and the family's together and we're celebrating together, and she's being spoiled and everybody loves her as a daughter, but without losing the fact that she's also the cosmic mother. So it's a long introduction, but it's good to think about what this Navaratri is. So that's a Durga Puja, and so there's another. So some people worship the Navadurgas as a way of these 9 forms of Durga. Some worship Durga Puja the last 4 days. Another tradition popular in North India, Himalayan tradition is done in Himalayas also. That the first 3 days are dedicated to Kali and Durga. Kali Durga is one deity. The next 3 days are dedicated to Lakshmi, and the last 3 days are dedicated to Saraswati. And a long time ago, as we slowly developed our own, what do we do during Navaratri? It started very simple here, We would do fire ceremonies in that way. We do 3 days Durga Mantra, 3 days Lakshmi Mantra, 3 days Saraswati Mantra. And that's maybe if we talk maybe next weekend, I can maybe go into what the significance of those 3. Maybe we'll fit it in, I'm not sure. I haven't started verse 1, what I want to say, so I'm not looking. We usually used to do this over 10 days, and we're going to do this over 2 days this time. So I'm going to have to skip some sections and summarize. But if you're interested, there's several years recordings of the 10 talks, so you can hear different versions. I get roughly the same thing every year because the ancient scriptures haven't changed. We get maybe a new little insight or new way of explaining it, but it's basically the same story, and our interpretive scheme to understand it, we haven't changed much. But that's also very interesting. And then an important part of the Navaratri is the recitation of the Chandi, the Devi Mahatmya, 700 verses. Either the chanting of it as a recitation, the performances of it. People do plays of it, as musicals and musical plays based on it. The reading of it, or the hearing of it, or the discussion of it. So that's what we're doing. We're doing the discussion part of it, the teaching of it, or describing of the significance of these prayers. And there's a way also, the 13 chapters of the Devi Mahatmya, the Chandi, can be split over the 9 days. There's different ways to do it over a month, to do it in 1 day, to do it in 3 days, to do it in 9 days, to do it in 5. There's different traditional ways of splitting. There's a traditional way of splitting it for the 8 days. So the first day would be chapter 1, which is a chapter, and the second day would be chapter 2 and 3, right? But because there is no second day, right? So on if you start tonight, we're just do chapter 1. So that's you can consider it cleared. If you want to recite it, then if you're doing it tomorrow, it's a longer reading, chapter 1, and then the first story, and then chapter 2 and 3, the first few chapters of the second major story. So the Devi, and so the Chandi is very important. It's very interesting. Devi Mahatmya means the glories of the Devi, the goddess's glories, the wonderful qualities, the glorification and glories of the goddess. And it's a small section. It's 700 verses of a much larger text, Markandeya Purana. Unfortunately, I've had the same like version translation with little side notes and things like that I've been using for 20 years, 15, 18 years, and the first 5 chapters are missing in my folder. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know. I ripped them out for some reason. I don't know, but they're gone. So I'm the few like how many verses. I mean, these are little things for the sake of discussion. How many verses of Markandeya Purana, when it was written, some of the details, they're not fresh in my mind. They used to be fresh in my mind, and they're supposed to be in the margins scribbled, but they're not. So it's the way it is. But it's probably 40 or 50,000 verses. It's a bigger one. It's one of the bigger Puranas, if I remember properly. And it's not the biggest, but it's not a small. I mean, like the Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses. That's considered small, and as far as Puranas go, they can go much longer, right? It goes over volumes. And Markandeya Purana, it's not exactly. It's a Shakta. I'm not sure where it's exactly listed as a Vaishnava, Shaivite, or Shakta. It's probably a Shakta, but it's not really. It's not the major text on Shakti. It's not really like the quintessential Shakta Purana. Like the Devi Bhagavatam would be the quintessential Shakti Purana. That's a classic Shakti Purana, and there's others. But there's a by the way story in the Markandeya Purana that where, just to illustrate a quick point, right? A point that comes up in another discussion that's not about the goddess, right? 3 stories or 3 traditional ancient goddess myths or stories are told, but they're not even that well told. They're not told very elaborately. They're told with a different purpose than usually, and with an agenda. You tell a story to illustrate the point you're trying to make, right? And they're told very short and very not very elaborately, without much description. But people have found them over the years this is very powerful. I mean, even though it's not the most elaborate, most descriptive form of the stories, there seems to be some power in the way it's put together. And so these 700 verses have been pulled out and become extremely popular. Like the Gita, out of 100,000 verses of the Mahabharata, the Gita, 700 verses, the same thing, has become extremely popular, right? I have not read the full Mahabharata. I don't think anybody here has read Mahabharata from cover to cover, right? But I bet you've read the Gita, or most of the Gita, some version of the Gita from cover to cover, right? So like that, the Chandi has become like that. But why is it so powerful? Why has it become so popular? It seems that maybe it's just such good writing, right? Such great revelation that just in a sketch, a whole story can be told in one verse. And that's actually the sign of a powerful mantra, where tons of information can be done in simplest words. The opposite of my talking. You know, I talk to illustrate a point. People just with one sentence. It's like such packed. Like it's definitely that. But it may be, and based upon that, I think it's even more. It's been considered that there's a lot of information literally packed into it, right? Not only the story is told in a very concise form, minimum way of telling the story, a big story is told, but all kinds of other information is encoded or packed or hidden or in the verses themselves. So it's been not only the beautiful, simple way to remember the main story, some important stories of the goddess, but as they're recited, as they're meditated upon, and people think about them, and then through Guru tradition, Guru Parampara, information is given. There's every verse, I'll say some verse, I'll read the general translation, or maybe chant a few verses from it, right? And its story says something. Oh, that's very nice, right? But then you think, but actually those words mean something different, right? Like when it says, oh, the king said. What word is used for king? Right? Oh, the king means this, but a king means something different. And then a king actually means a person. And a person means anybody who lives in the material world. And therefore, now it's about the human condition. And you start turning every word, or that the word for ghee is actually hidden for the mantra hrim, and hrim is the real ghee that's poured into the fire. It's like it can get deeper and deeper and deeper, and pretty soon people have done like Kabbalistic like numerology on it. It's like where every 16th letter is a particular letter of a particular mantra. It seems to be, I don't know, whether we're looking for it and finding all kinds of stuff in it, or it's become so popular because there seems to be a lot hidden and packed and compacted in it. One of the things about Vedic mantras, the Vedas are restricted, right? One has to be in a certain family, certain lineage, certain education, certain initiations to chant the Vedas, to hear the Vedas or chant the Vedas. But there's no such rule for the Puranas. It says the Puranas are written so that everybody can get the gist of the Vedas for everybody. There's no restrictions, right? So the Chandi, great, no restrictions, right? Seems to be very powerful. But then people began to realize, whoa, this is really powerful, right? And by reciting it, there seems to be power, right? And maybe dangerous, right? Even though it's open, theoretically, the Markham Paramparana can be read by anybody, right? But people began to just take these 700 verses and recite them, and they begin to I'll chant this one with certain ceremonies in order to get wealth, or that this one in order to make things favorable to me, this one to destroy my enemies, this one to awaken Kundalini. This, and all of a sudden it realized it was like a tantric text, a tantra shastra, even though it's not tantra. People realize actually maybe it is. Right? And therefore, the ancient rishis, they say they cursed the Chandi. They gave some restrictions, right? And there's so that anybody without initiation into the Chandi, right, will not get its power, because the power was considered too powerful, either for other people to harm. You can do harm to others with this power, or you can also hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing. You give some licensing requirement before before you get the keys to a car. There should be some minimum restrictions on how are you qualified and old enough, mature enough to drive it, type of thing, right? And so there's the whole set of mantras that are supposed to be chanted before the Chandi that translate as to remove the curse of Vishishta, Vishwamitra, and one other, I forget, Vishwamitra, Vishishta. There's 3 rishis I'm forgetting, but there's please remove the curses from it, so that we get. And so then it became that, and also hidden within the mantras, there seems to be another mantra. It's called the Navarana mantra. This 9-lettered, it has Chamunda Viche, the very famous mantra with some beach mantra. I mean, Klim Chamunda Viche. Right? So that's considered, unless you're initiated into that mantra, one can't chant the Chandi. It becomes like that. Of course, everybody can chant the Chandi. There's no real, but to be considered dangerous, right? Or ineffective. In a certain sense, maybe it was perhaps a initiatic circle now trying to control something used to be for everybody. It could be interpreted that also. But I think there's something I've seen, maybe some people in this room remember, we've seen people burn themselves out on the Chandi. We've seen it cause harm to people. People maybe it's just a mental temperament and nothing to do with the text itself, right? But it's Yeah, so there's some potential danger to it, but then with devotion, without, if you're not trying to use the mantras for some purpose to do something, then there's no danger. If you're trying to do something with something, like a hammer is not dangerous, you try to hit something with it, right? Right. So if you're trying to, the mantras, they're just beautiful. They're meditations on the Divine Mother and revelations of sacred lore and sacred tradition. In that sense, we're describing it openly without any restriction. But these mantras have also been found to do something, and before doing something, you should know what you're doing before you do something, right? So we're not presenting that. We're not presenting that level. So am I out of time? I don't know. Can't see that. What time is it now? What is it? 4. Okay. My brain. So chapter 1. So there's a frame. There's a frame story. There's always a story. Sri Durgaye Namaha. It starts. Atta Sri Durga Saptashati. Now the 700 verses in praise of Mother Durga. Right. It starts, and then I won't recite. We're not reciting. It starts. So the main there's an opening story about 2 great demons, Madhu and Kaitaba. This is the first that come out of the ear of Lord Vishnu. There's 3 stories being told. That's the first story that's told, the second part of chapter 1. Then the next story is about the killing of another great demon of Mahishasura, the buffalo demon. When Ma Durga appears in a few days, she'll be Mahishasura Mardini, killing Mahishasura, like we chanted last night, Mahishasura Mardini Stota, killer of Mahishasura. Then and his associated demons, which are very deeply insignificant. And then the final story, the Charita, is the killing of Shumba, another 2 demons, Shumba and Nishumba. So Mahishasura is a very gross demon. He can take any form he wants, but he likes the form of a buffalo, and a buffalo is considered very low animalistic consciousness. So and so if we were to give a interpretive meaning, symbolic representation, assignment to these, he would, it's like lust and greed and kind of the cruder aspect of our personality, right? And that when that takes over, it causes an untenable situation. The Divine Mother has to help overcome it. The final 2 deities, the demons, Shumba and Nishumba, these are very subtle demons. They have to deal with really principles of wrong identity, of ego, and where our ego and our self-obsession comes from Shumba and Nishumba. Nishumba is the opposite of ego in this interpretation. So it's like that emptiness, the emptiness we feel that makes us put up a big front. The big back, big empty back that makes us put up a big front, right? The low self-esteem that causes dramatic ego display, right? And so his killing is a very refined stage of spiritual life, where we have to notch it. So Mahishasura represents Rajas, right? That animalistic type of passionate type of thing, if you give it this interpretation. And Shumba and Nishumba are more sattvic. These are more refined qualities that also have to be overcome. In the first story, Madhu and Kaitva, in that structure, he would represent tamas, right? And they come from sleeping. We'll get to this there. I'm just giving a little bit of a bird's eye sleeping consciousness, the result of inertia, of unconsciousness, right? So the 3 stories are going to be told to 3 different ways of could be interpreted. This is the way we interpret it. This is our interpretive scheme, hermeneutical tradition, yogic, tantric tradition that we come from. We interpret the three as a sadhana shastra, also the revealing stages of sadhana and the types of things that come up in our sadhana, right? But the frame story for the whole thing is, again, interesting enough, also going to be 3 characters. Just like we have 3 forms of the goddess that kill 3 groups of demons, the 3 are going to again appear in the frame story. In the frame story, there is a merchant and a king. Thank you. You remember from last year. The merchant and the king, and and the sage. They go to the sage. So again, these represent Raja, Sattva. The sage represents Sattva. The merchant represents. Anyways, we'll get there in a second. We'll jump ahead. So at every of the three stories, the three sections, the three charitas, they're presided over by a different deity, right? The first story is presided over Mahakali, right? Kali is the main deity. Interesting enough, Kali is not mentioned once in this story, right? Her name does not come up, right? The second story is presided over Lakshmi. Lakshmi is not mentioned in that Leela at all, and the third is presiding by Mahasaraswati. She's mentioned briefly, but not really. She's not the presiding deity. She's a minor associated with one of the matrikas in a certain sense, right? So the stories are this way of meditating. The first one is presiding deity is Kali, then Lakshmi and Saraswati. You see that matches the Navaratri, where you do 3 days Kali Puja, 3 days Lakshmi Puja, 3 days Saraswati Puja. That has very deep significance. Swami Chidananda has a book, The Worship of God as Mother. He gave over 9 nights, and he deeply goes into it's one of the few books we sell, small book from the Divine Life Society, where he's talking about the significance of why those three, that order of worshiping. Maybe we'll be able to feed it, fold it in. And also, so it starts with, it's Kali, Lakshmi, Saraswati. But then it starts with, each section starts with a Bij Mantra. And so, which also is not the right Bij Mantra, right? So it's first one, it starts Om Namas Chandikaye, Om, Aim, Markandeya Vacha, right? We bow to Goddess Chandi, that's the main deity here. And then it starts with Aim, right? Aim is for Saraswati and not Kali. Then the second one, so Aim. Then the second one is for Lakshmi, and actually that one kind of fits. That is Hrim, right? And then the third section starts with Om Klim Devu Vacha, whatever the first mantra start, and their Klim is for Kali, right? So in the order of meditation is Kali, Lakshmi, Saraswati, but it's given Saraswati, Lakshmi, Kali. So there's lots of, like I said, there's a lot of things shoved in here, a lot of theology and symbology and meaning and technique and sadhana understanding shoved in. Starts Saraswati, Lakshmi, Kali, right? And so Saraswati is the Shakti of Brahma, the creator, right? So at the very beginning, it's the first Vageshwari, right? So from the unmanifested to the manifest, it's purest. That's the vibration of Saraswati, purest sound, the pure Om, the pure Vedas, yeah, right? Then we have a manifested world under the care of Lakshmi, who sustains the world, and then at the end, everything is destroyed or goes into inertia. That is the realm of Shiva and Kali, in that way of looking at it, the kind of Trimurti way of looking at it, right? As sadhana. Right, so that's how creation happens, from the bindu out, right? From the bindu, where actually around the center of bindu is, you have the Vagdevata, the deities of the alphabet, the forms of Saraswati. There at the very beginning, and then it goes out, and then finally at the outer edge is the material world of name, form, change, like that, from sattva to rajas so it's from sattva to rajas to tamas, right? But it's weird because each one, part of the guna theory, each one contains the other. Because Brahma is rajas, but here he's sattva. Because it's rajas that creates, but it's at its most sattvic, right? Right. So anyway, I got into a long conversation with Swami Harinamananda, 2-hour conversation on the phone on this very point 2 days ago. It's fresh in my mind. I don't have time. I don't have 2 hours. I have 20 minutes left, so I can't do that. But very interesting. But anyway, but in the Chandi, as sadhana shastra, it's reversed. It goes. So it's mentioned. Bij mantras is from creation to expression. Saraswati, Lakshmi, Kali, from from subtle to manifest to gross, right? But the order of the deities presented, first Kali, then Lakshmi, then Saraswati, is the reverse. That's the realm of sadhana. And so Swami Chidananda, in that book you mentioned, in the beginning we invoke Kali, right, Durga, as, in a certain sense, a fierce, transformative, the destructive aspect, right? We need to, because you need to wake up, we need to let go of, Swami Shivananda has a book, How to Eradicate Vices, and what is it? Develop Virtues and Eradicate Vices. It's a painful book. I don't like to read it. I wouldn't suggest it to anybody. But he defines spiritual life as the eradication of vices and the development of virtue. That's the first step, right? There's stuff we have to overcome. We're in ignorance, right? We're materialistic thinking. We have bad habits and addictions, and like those things have to go. I mean, there's no two ways around it, right? And so even before beginning spiritual life, you have to struggle with the most tamasic aspects of our personality and our habits and behaviors and thinking and worldviews. Those things have to. So we invoke the breaking Shakti, Kali and Durga, right, as the beginning of sadhana, right? And then we invoke Lakshmi. Lakshmi in the material world becomes money and wealth and happiness, things that sustain us. But in the spiritual world becomes sadhana Shakti. We invoke her to sustain our sadhana, our years of sadhana. We need Lakshmi to sustain it, right? The transformative work of doing the more careful purification of the heart and the mind and consciousness and body. That's sadhana, mana shuddhi. All sadhana is mana shuddhi, Thakur said. Our Guruji said, actually Shankaracharya says it. It's ultimately mana shuddhi. Even he says that all purpose of all sadhana is the purification of the mind, right? And then the final is Saraswati, Rama Saraswati, where the mind becomes extremely refined, represented by Saraswati, right? She's white. She wears white. She has a crystal mala. She holds the Vedas. She has a Veena. So it's classical music, scriptural knowledge, refined mantras, everything at its most pure, right? So this is the stage. So reversing as creation goes from the unmanifested into manifestation. Sadhana is a way of going lost in manifestation back to the source, right? So this is why these interesting the beach mantras and the dhyan slokas don't match. So first let's start to say interesting mantra, dhyan sloka on Kali. Holding sword, disc, mace, arrow, bow, club, spear, sling, human head, and conch in your 10 arms. With 3 eyes, adorned with limbs, shining like a blue jewel, and having 10 faces, we worship you, great Mother Kali, who the lotus-born Brahma praised for destruction of the demons Madhu and Kaitaba. So here's Kali, who is the one that Brahma prayed to kill Madhu and Kaitaba. That brings us to the first story, right? Even though her name's never mentioned, but she's mentioned in this first story as Yoga Nidra, right? So we have to think how she's going to be. Om Namas Chandikaye, we bow to you, Mother Chandi. Om Aim, Saraswati, Markandeya Vacha. Markandeya is the Rishi. Savarni, the son of Lord Surya, became the 8th Manu. Please listen as I explain details of his birth. By the grace of Goddess Mahamaya, the son of Lord Surya became the Lord of the 8th Manvantara. Of this subject I will speak. Right, so this is actually comes from how did Suvarni become? That's the thing is the real question is not who the Divine Mother is. Tell me about the Mother. In the many thousands of verses in the Markandeya Purana, one of the things that makes a Purana is the lineage of kings and the lineages of Manus. There's like 6 topics. I forget them. I should know them, but there are 6 topics that makes a Purana. One of which is the lineage of kings and the lineage of and the list of Manus. These are 2 requirements, right? So you have to list who are the Manus. There's there's the creation cycles. Lord Brahma lives for an inconceivably long period of time. And within his life, his life is separated into 14 sections called Manvantars. Each Manvantara is presided over a presiding person, right? A Manu, right? We get the word man from this word. It's the same word, And so in a certain way, we can maybe think of him like an Adam or something, like the first man or proto-man or... It's not important for this thing. But at present, the Manu